Hello and welcome to a special edition. They're all special, aren't they? It's 3:10 to left. The band is back together. It's like watching the Blues Brothers when you got to bring the band all back together. Alex Spear is with us once again. I'm Tom Garrett. I'm back once again. One more sort of festive little moment before the holidays. Alex, my friend, how are you?
I'm great, although I feel like I should have worn sunglasses if we were going to try to rock the Blues Brothers motif. I missed Dallas. How was it, Tom? Anything happened there?
Yeah, lots happened there. Juan Soto signed, if you hadn't heard. He got a lot of money. And Scott Boras spoke, which is always fun and exciting and pun filled. And then after a really depressing first 48 hours for Red Sox fans, Garrett Crochet was obtained and acquired, and it wasn't quite as depressing anymore. So you covered them from afar. I covered them from the pit of misery that we call the media workroom. What did it look like from 30,000 feet? Because down on the ground, you never know. It's all sort of just happening.
Well, for me, it looked like birthday festivities because both my wife and son celebrated their birthdays during the winter meetings. So busy. Had a big excursion to Jordan's Furniture, the Enchanted Village, magical. But setting that aside, it was pretty interesting to see all of this unfolding from afar, particularly when you're reminded of kind of the chaos that exists inside of the winter meetings bubble when not you're having things like, oh, there's an organizational rift forming about Alex Bregman in the middle of Max Fried chaos happening, and are the Red Sox, is this once again going to be is it going to be fair to question how far they're willing to spend or how uncomfortable they're willing to get in terms of acquiring top of the industry talent, and then boom, all of a sudden you're looking at out of nowhere. While I was actually on the ice in the Enchanted Village, my colleague Julian McWilliams reporting that a Crochet trade had been agreed upon, and Kyle Teal was going to be traded. So it's a weird thing to see it at a distance because the dynamics of it, things are reported in clusters that move slowly, and then boom. So the Fried stuff accelerating as quickly as it does is always interesting to see when you're not in the middle of it, immersed in 1,000 different conversations because everyone in the baseball industry is under the same building. How was it on the inside, Tom? How was this a chaotic one? Was it
chaotic is a good word, and you used the word uncomfortable, which was the word we kept hearing from Craig Breslow, right? The word uncomfortable was thrown around a lot. Uncomfortable is usually, as you know, just the feeling that the reporters have after trying to stay up and pony up to the bar to get scoops from everybody late at night, or from trying to find a position where you can hold your microphone up for the 45 minutes of Scott Boras talking in the lobby. So there is always a certain amount of uncomfort at the winter meetings. I think this was my 14th, if I counted correctly. And what I was excited about, and we'll hear. I want to hear, and we're going to dig into everything you just said in a couple minutes. We're gonna do the forensic breakdown of what the Red Sox have done, what they will do from here, what they should do from here, what they won't do from here. We'll do all that. But looking at the winter meetings as a whole this year, I was happy that I thought there was a fair amount of activity and buzz back at the winter meetings, and it had been a few years, right? To the point where I think all of us and a lot of people throughout the baseball industry were beginning to question whether or not the winter meetings were necessary, right? Listen, you and I know it is from a public perception of Baseball Incorporated, okay? It's the one time where baseball sort of pushes itself out in the middle of the winter or late fall, technically, but into the mainstream media, right? ESPN was covering the pursuit of Juan Soto. Non-traditional baseball media types were running stories. People were asking me about what the Red Sox were going to do. And that hasn't changed, right? You can still ask me what the Red Sox are going to do, but people aren't asking that today. People were asking it last week because the winter meetings were happening and everybody expects something to happen. And I thought the Soto timing was really good. Had that dragged on till late in the meetings or after the winter meetings, we might not have had anything. But the fact that it happened Sunday night, I was talking to Derek Shelton, the Pirates manager, on Monday morning, and Shelton said, okay, the offseason begins now. And the Pirates weren't in on Juan Soto. The Pirates had nothing to do with Juan Soto, but the dominoes that fall after Soto make all their way back through 30 teams, right? A lot of teams are hamstrung, not knowing what other teams are doing, not knowing what trades might be available, not knowing what the market was going to be. So I thought it was great theater because you had the Soto news come out early enough on Sunday night that it wasn't overnight, right? The buzz was out there Sunday night, news reports at the late Sports Center and the 11 o'clock news locally. Everybody had that story. And then Monday morning, it kind of felt like, 30 GMs woke up and hit the ground running. And the Fried thing came quickly, the Crochet thing, as you said, some other minor deals made. Overall, I give it like maybe a B, maybe a B plus, but we've been living through some D's and C minuses over the last few years. So I thought it was a pretty good winter meeting. What'd you think?
It's funny because like I go back 2 winter meetings ago, and I feel like that's the forgotten great winter meetings where we had Trey Turner and Xander and Aaron Judge all getting to deals, like mega deals over the course of the winter meetings. And it was like, it's back. But the winter meetings that followed that immediately, when kind of the deep freeze of the media questions with the diamond, with the collapse of the Diamond Holdings, and then the entire market being frozen for Shohei, followed by Yamamoto, really kind of made last year a total dud in terms of the winter meetings. But yeah, I think that we see every 2 to 3 years, like roughly, you see a great one followed by a couple lame ones. So I went to a place that has all kinds of great inflation, so I give it an A. I found it to be entertaining from afar, worth diverting my attention for a second from that ice skating around at Jordan's. I thought that,
and blueberry muffins. Don't forget the blueberry muffins.
Oh, we walked away with some blueberry muffins. Teams closed their deals, we closed ours. But
I want to jump in real quick because I'm glad you brought up that one 2 years ago, because that's on me. I forget that because I actually had to come home on the Wednesday because the tradition, the New England Sports, Sports Museum event that you've been a part of, that year it was on the Wednesday night of the winter meetings. So I actually had to come home a day early to MC that. I think we're in San Diego. Was that in San Diego?
Yeah.
I feel that was in San Diego.
Yeah.
So I actually had to catch the red eye home Tuesday night to be there for Wednesday night. And as we were all leaving the after party of the tradition is when the Xander Bogaerts news got out. And I had considered staying for one more, and I just saw a lot of people who wanted to talk about really angry Red Sox takes. And I said, now this is a really good time to get out of here. But you're right. That wound up being, because I always think of the Bogaerts deal as coming out after the winter meetings because, it's all about me. And I think of those winter meetings as ending Tuesday night because that's when I left. But you're right. That was, I will stand corrected. That was a pretty good winter meetings.
Yeah, had like $1 billion thrown around, right, with Correa coming out shortly thereafter. So but this was a good one. This one, again, you had Soto as like actual news entering into the entire industry, kind of having to take stock of like this. It's not a post-apocalyptic landscape, but it is a very changed landscape once you have that mega deal occurring, which, maybe that's an accelerant in terms of getting Kyle Tucker moved, right? When the Astros were like, oh no, we're definitely not signing him now. And you wonder what the kind of like how that might impact the thinking of the Blue Jays moving forward as they have Vlad Guerrero, and thinking about, whatever shape, like, does reality dawn on them about the likelihood of making a deal with them, with Guerrero and the Blue Jays. After that, we were waiting to see if there was a pivot. I don't think there has been. The Blue Jays have still been really active in the top of the market in trying to get really good talent to surround Guerrero with. But I think that there was meat on the bone for conversation, speculation, rumors, and ultimately a couple of other big deals, one of which involved the Boston Red Sox.
And let's get in on that now. So the Red Sox, again, miss out on Soto, and who knows how serious they were. I mean, they were genuine in their attempt, and it was a very big number that they offered. I think we all sort of realize a left-handed bat wasn't necessarily what they need, but this is a generational talent that they thought was worth the money. Good for them. They didn't get him. We immediately start talking about Corbin Burnes and Max Fried. Corbin Burnes hasn't signed yet. Max Fried signed pretty quickly, and that was a mega deal that I think caught some people by surprise. Then the Red Sox, quietly and suddenly, Julian McWilliams comes out with that note. Here they go. They've made the deal. Your take on the deal? They gave up a lot. They gave up 4 of their top 15 prospects, including a guy who, in Kyle Teal, we all sort of expected to be the future catcher of the Boston Red Sox. But they get a 25-year-old guy who's 6'6" and averages 98 miles an hour with the fastball and is filthy. Or at least he was last year when he had an all-star season with the worst team in baseball. When you look at the deal, what they gave up, what they get, and where they stand now, what do you think about it?
I thought Josh Beckett. To me, that's what this deal was. It wasn't Sale. Sale was already established as, as a perennial Cy Young candidate year over year over year. And it was clearly going to take, one of the top handful of prospects in baseball to get Sale with a package led by Moncada. At the time, Kopech was top 20 in the sport, number 4 in the Red Sox organization. I didn't think that was, even though despite the teams being involved, I didn't think that was quite the right analog. This is more a guy like Beckett who has more runway, because Beckett, the criticism when the Red Sox traded for him in 2005 was he's never thrown 200 innings. He had injuries. There had been this tantalizing, extraordinary potential that had been demonstrated in a couple of ways, but never the complete totality of what people thought he could accomplish. That's Crochet to me, who is even less of a track record in some ways than Beckett, but a guy who over the course of 150 innings was mind-blowingly good. And I know that the ERA doesn't look good, and I know that the second half numbers didn't look good. His stuff is stupid good. Like it's almost hilarious to look at the heat maps of like how he attacks the strike zone. This is someone whose fastball is so freaking good that he can use that as his primary pitch in an era when everyone is running away from their fastball. Garrett Crochet does not have to do so. He can throw it right down the middle. There's a big red Jupiter's eye in the middle of his heat map, and opposing hitters hit less than 200 against it because it's such an overpowering pitch. Like, that's the anchor that for a guy who has a great deal of pitching intellect and IQ, who's now shown an ability to reshape his arsenal in all kinds of ways, to create multiple wipeout weapons. To have the strikeout rate that he does, a strikeout rate that was a tick better than Blake Snell, but to do it with a walk rate that's more in the Nate Eovaldi range is ridiculous. Like, that is absurdly good stuff. This is a video game pitcher who has a chance, who has true front of the rotation stuff. Is he going to be durable enough to hold that over 200, let's not even say 200, right? That's not a thing anymore. I think there were 4 200 inning pitchers in Major League Baseball last year. So can he do that for 180 innings? That's not that much of a bump over the 140, 150 that he had. This was someone who from the standpoint of expected numbers, which is what teams care about now, was better than Tariq Skubal over the course of last year, right? Like, that's the type of upside that you're looking at. So yes, there's going to have to be a level that he gets to in order to achieve that high end. But this is one of the most valuable pitchers in the sport. So for that, to be able to get a guy like that without giving up one of the top 3 prospects, to keep Christian Campbell and Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer in the system, and to make a deal outside of that, that's a testament to the depth in the system that they worked really hard to get, but also leaves them in a pretty good spot moving forward.
He's 25 years old. Just skipped over the minors, right? After Tommy John surgery, this stuff's too good to pitch in the minors. Let's get him up with the majors. Really, his 1 year of being a starting pitcher was at the major league level, and you just described how well it went. You have him for 2 years of control. And if you look at the projections, probably in the 3 million range this coming year. Who knows where he'll be after, but because he doesn't have that track record, it won't be what it would be for a lot of pitchers of that success. Clearly, I think it's a great deal, right? I mean, it gives them that top of the rotation guy they've been talking about for a long time. As you said, they didn't touch the top 3 guys, didn't touch anybody off the major league market. There's still opportunities to make another deal here if trades are where you're going to go. And he's 25 years old. He is not yet scratching his prime major league years if he stays healthy. This is a good deal now. It could be a great deal if you can extend this guy and lock him up and make him a centerpiece of your rotation for years to come. Understandably, Craig Breslow kind of tiptoed around that and danced around that when asked. He said, "We're not going to do that. We'll go." But but it would make sense, right? The sooner you do it, the less money it should cost you because you're going to buy out these next couple of years when he's not making a lot of money and extend him beyond that. What would an extension look like? And do you think the Red Sox can get it done? And will there be an effort, in your opinion, Alex, to get it done either before the coming season or early on in the 2025 season?
I would think that unquestionably it'll at least be explored. But the question of what does it look like is super complicated because there are so few pitchers who have this track record, right? Where they've been a reliever with these low innings thresholds. And then all of a sudden you're moving them to the rotation and they look incredible. It's a somewhat difficult, series of comps to be able to draw upon. The one thing that I would point out is that, like, for me, the deal is made without the notion of an extension in mind. That would be kind of a bonus, but you're looking at Crochet as a guy who potentially, like, teams think about the dollar figure that a player is worth, that a player's projected performance is worth relative to what they're making. So let's say that Crochet between this year and next through arbitration would make about $15 million. Like, conservatively, you could think that this is a guy who would be worth $100 million in terms of his performance. So you're looking at $85 to $90 million of surplus value right now. So, like, that's kind of where you get at when you're looking at Kyle Teal and Braden Montgomery and as well as Chase Mydroth and Wickelman Gonzalez. There's a chance that the White Sox could surpass that. There's a chance they could surpass it by a lot, especially depending on what happens with Braden Montgomery. Since he's never played a professional game, we don't know. But to me, the deal is made just in a vacuum on its merits, and then you explore the extension stuff afterwards. But what could an extension look like? Really interesting question, right? Like, he is represented by an agency in CAA that has gotten a number of extensions done through the years. So that's, it's not a Boris guy where you're kind of like, that's not going to happen. But it's, is the going rate, would it be to add on, let's say, 6 years at $25 million a year, atop the 2 years in, let's say, $15 million that they're going to get in the short term? Like, maybe that kind of gets you into the ballpark of, like, a 6 and 150 extension atop the next 2 years. I don't know, though. I don't want to pretend because it may be the case that he just forges his own path and he says, this is what I think I'm worth, and you'll either pay it or I'll go to free agency, and either way it's cool. But he probably doesn't want to compromise his value too much. There is risk, right, because of how brief his period as a starter is. So he might not take it for granted that this is his future, which is something that worked on behalf of the White Sox with Chris Sale back in the day when he was willing to sign because he didn't know what he was going to be at the big league level. I guess some of it depends on Crochet's cockiness about how he's going to be moving forward.
It's interesting stuff, right? And certainly he said all the right things on his media availability late last week. Professed love for the organization, and every jersey he has ever worn has been connected to a Red Sox great. So he'll wear 35 next year because he understands you can't just slap 45 on your back and show up on opening day at Fenway Park. And you can't be 34 and you can't be 14, which are other numbers he's worn in the past. Let's take a second here and listen to a little bit of what Garrett Crochet had to say. I thought he handled the media availability great, talking about getting out of Chicago and coming to a place where they expect you to win. Here's what he said last week when he spoke with the media.
Do you anticipate having conversations with the Red Sox on what they would like to see?
Yeah, I believe I'm gonna have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation next week with Andrew Bailey and the rest of the staff. Are already have a relationship kind of bridged from my former pitching coach and Ethan Katz to Andrew Bailey, having known each other just through the game. So I anticipate those conversations will come. I've done a little bit of thinking of it on my own, just in terms of incorporating the sinker later in the year. And feeling like I have truly 5 pitches that I could throw in any moment. So it'll definitely be a fine-tuning game and one that, I'm sure that there's a lot of ways to skin the cat in that regard. But ultimately, I don't think that I'll change the fastball cutter usage a whole lot. I feel like that's kind of my bread and butter and a big reason why I had success last year. But the addition of the sinker, I think, is a conversation worth having.
Garrett, how much, I guess, have you had a chance to maybe talk with Giolito and Hendricks and some of the guys just that you might have known from Chicago on what the transition might be like, and if that'll be help it make it even easier knowing a few guys?
Yeah, I've texted with them a little bit, and a little bit of the rest of the team as well. Had a couple guys reach out, so it was really cool to immediately feel welcome and wanted in the organization. So I haven't really talked much beyond spring training housing and where guys like to live at in Boston. That's about as far as the conversations have gone. But I really look forward to sharing the clubhouse with those guys.
Hey, Garrett. Just as far as last year, when it was your first full season as a starter in the big leagues, and wanted to get a sense of how you felt physically as the year went on, and kind of how you feel you made the adjustment now, kind of with a full year under your belt.
Yeah, I've always talked a lot about, just the 5-day routine being huge for me. I think that ultimately led, to good health throughout the year, and just a consistent output from a production standpoint. Transitioning to a starter is easier said than done, but at the same time, I felt like I was able to take it in stride really well. At the same time, you're just getting outs. You just happen to be getting more of them. So for me, there really wasn't a big adjustment.
And now, I guess, now that you have 140 something innings, in a season under your belt, do you feel you're at a point now where, come second half next year, you'll be good to hopefully push it the rest of the way? Yeah, definitely.
In terms of how long my leash will be, I hope to not even be wearing a collar come second half next year.
How frustrated were you with that aspect of things last year, where it seemed like you wanted to be given a little bit more down the stretch of the season, and obviously that's a big deal for you moving forward is your availability?
Yeah, it was frustrating in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I understood the usage concerns. Going from 12 to 100 would be seen as a big jump, and just even being that close to 150 is a lot greater. But for me, there was a lot of things that I was working on in the second half that I felt like I could have expanded on had the innings, been a little bit more normal, I suppose. But at the same time, that's kind of the cards I was dealt, and I was still just kind of getting my work in as best as I could.
That being said, how do you feel you evolved as a pitcher last year? As you mentioned, plus fastball, cutter was predominantly what you used. How do you feel you kind of changed as a pitcher, grew as a pitcher last year? Yeah,
so for me, it was as a reliever, I was pretty much all fastball, slider. The changeup, I probably threw it like a 9% clip, which it was probably the exact same as a starter, maybe less, maybe more. But I felt like I was utilizing the changeup a lot more effectively, and kind of learned the situations to throw it based on hitters' reactions or just setting it up in general. And the sweeper was a pitch that, at the beginning of the year, I was doing exactly what I wanted to with it in terms of, throwing it for strikes at a higher clip, using it early, using it late. But adding the cutter, which I really didn't do until spring training, was where the real growth started to set in. I felt like that was huge for my game as a whole. It was kind of protecting the sweeper and protecting the four seam all at the same time. Throughout the year, as hitters began to adjust to me, I felt that adding a sinker maybe wasn't necessary, but I saw it as very beneficial after seeing how the cutter panned out. Just being a pitch that breaks to my glove side, and I could throw it hard like a fastball. I kind of wanted to pair that with another pitch that broke arm side that I could throw hard like a fastball. Well, with that being said, though, I feel like the changeup and the sweeper still have their moments and their days in the sun, but I think that the sinker and cutter and four seam, just that trio is, that's kind of going to become who I am.
Building off of that, Garrett, how do you explain the jump in strike throwing and the decrease in walk rate? Was that a product of just the cutter and allowing you to stay in the zone, or health? What was that?
Yeah, for me, it was a little bit of, just knowing that I'm going to be going deeper in the games, and I want to go as deep as I can and be as economical with my pitches as possible. So I think that it was more of a mentality of, throwing strikes is what's going to ultimately help the team and help conserve the bullpen. And also, that's just the name of the game. You got to give the hitter a chance at some point. And eventually it kind of developed into just a natural confidence. The cutter definitely helped with that. Just being a pitch that I felt like I could throw it down the middle for the most part, and just knowing that it wasn't a straight fastball, that it was gonna either induce weak contact or a swing and miss, or just have enough of a wrinkle to make the hitter second guess and take it for a strike.
Like, was there a part of you that was relieved to have this, this question of where your future was going to be spent behind you when you heard of the trade?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of relief when it finally came to fruition, and I got the call from Getz and eventually Breslow as well. A lot of people, might view the trade as adding some chaos into your life, but for me, it felt like all the chaos was stripped away. Just worrying about it for 8 months on end, knowing that it's kind of the writing on the wall. It was nice to have it, kind of just being able to put it behind me and looking forward to the season.
All right, good stuff from Garrett Crochet, and I think everybody agrees for the most part, even though they gave up a lot. And I know there's that portion of Red Sox fans who are just going to be unhappy with whatever they do right now. They gave up all that for one pitcher, but let's agree it's a good move. They still haven't spent any money. It's a good move. It would be a great first move. In other words, there are other moves to come. If we look back at the Garrett Crochet as the start of what they did this offseason, I think we're all going to be pretty happy. So the question is, Alex, what do they do from here? Where do they go next? Let's sort of maybe not break it down in the order of which they'll do it, but let's look at where they can still help themselves, beginning with that rotation, right? If he makes this rotation better, does he make it good enough? Do they need one more arm? I think they do, and there are arms available both on the free agent market and the trade market.
Well, I even want to rewind, before we look forward. One thing that was interesting to me that I've unearthed is that the Red Sox were open to the idea of both signing Fried, and trading for Crochet. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of where they're at in terms of the ambition of upgrading the rotation. Like they see this as a path to being a pretty important one, to getting a lot better. And so that also suggests, though, if they were thinking about, their offer to Fried got out to 7 years and got up into the vicinity of $200 million, albeit with, I think that 190, they were at 190-ish with a willingness to go above that, albeit with some deferrals. That suggests that they are willing to spend more on top talents in the market. Now, we'll see whether or not that actually happens, but that tells you a lot about their thinking. And I think that I would be shocked at this point if the Red Sox didn't add another starter who they thought was at least capable of being a mid-rotation guy or better. Like, I think that like a guy like Walker Buehler is almost the floor of what they seem to be pursuing for the rest of this offseason. Buehler obviously has been a top of the rotation guy in the past. He struggled a lot in 2024 as he was coming back with his first full year from Tommy John surgery, and so was more of a back end guy for the Dodgers when he was pitching, until he looked really, really good in his last couple of appearances. The most memorable that he will probably ever have in his career in the World Series. So that was a good finishing kick for him. Good job, Walker Buehler.
Yeah, 10 innings, right? 10 scoreless innings to end his postseason run, including, as you said, the final out of the World Series. I mean, you say it's the biggest one of his career. I don't know if he beats the Dodgers with the Red Sox in Game 7 of the World Series. That might be better, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah, I agree. Walker Buehler would be a good fit, but when you're saying a guy who could be a middle of the rotation or better, that's not a description for Corbin Burnes, who is still sitting out there. And we keep hearing San Francisco and Toronto, but we haven't seen anything done. Is there an opportunity for the Red Sox? It's going to take more than 7 years and 190. We know that. But is there an opening here for the Red Sox to pull this off, or is that sort of an opportunity that's already moved away from them?
Yeah, the thing that strikes me is that it's not just 7,190. It'll probably have to beat the Fried contract that happened with the Yankees of 8 and 208, right? Like, at least in terms of total value, in terms of guarantee of the deal. So are the Red Sox going to have an appetite it was 8 and 218 for Fried. So are the Red Sox going to have an appetite to spend that much on a starter? Not sure. I don't think the door is completely closed, but I think that you're probably certainly the the urgency that they feel in terms of adding to the top of the rotation was kind of measured to some degree by the acquisition of Crochet. I think they would love to add 2 top of the rotation starters, but they're probably going to feel more comfortable having identifying a limit for Burnes and not going past that because of what they already have. So I think beyond that, you take an open-minded approach to the rest of the free agent market. Obviously, like I said, we've heard things connecting them to Buehler. Haven't heard a lot about Jack Flaherty, which is kind of interesting, given that he does have some experience in the AL East, although he's been much better not in the AL East. But he's someone who represents a kind of next tier. Manaea is certainly still out there. He's interesting, left-handed, looked outstanding down the stretch last year. So do you want to, insofar as they were willing to bet on Crochet based on what he showed in his first exposure to starting, do the Red Sox feel like they can bet on Manaea based on what he showed just in the second half of last year, which was kind of frontline stuff? And he was a mid-rotation guy outside of that in other parts of his career. Would they want to bring back Nick Pivetta? I don't think that the door is closed there. And then you get into the trades.
I agree. They still like Nick Pivetta. There's no doubt about that. You ask up and down that organization, they very much still like Nick Pivetta. And I think, that was, and by the way, you ask how the winter meetings was, the low point, I think, for somebody covering the Red Sox was after not getting Soto and not getting Fried. When you woke up that morning, I think it was Wednesday morning originally, well before the Crochet stuff, and the stories out there were about how the Red Sox are interested in Nick Pivetta. And Red Sox fans, after being tantalized by Soto and Fried, were not interested in Nick Pivetta as being the big acquisition. Now, bringing him back as a depth guy, I think makes a lot of sense. So does the trade market, right? And we've been talking about Seattle as a dance partner with the Red Sox for a long time. Pittsburgh profiles very similar, right? A pitching-rich organization that needs help offensively. It's why Nick York for Quinn Priest happened last year, right? So those are 2 organizations that we've talked a lot about for a while, especially Seattle, right? Because they have starting pitching. And as soon as this deal was over and Tristan Casas was still a member of the Red Sox and Wilyer Abreu was still a member of the Red Sox, it felt like we hadn't even finished tweeting about Garrett Crochet yet. And people were talking about Seattle. Obviously, Gilbert or Kirby or Wu are young guys that any team would want, but it makes sense that Seattle might be dangling Luis Castillo, who is the one owed the money over the next few seasons. You said that you had learned that a deal with Casas for Castillo was a straight out no. Is that still what you're hearing? And what are you hearing about Seattle?
That's not what Seattle would be interested in as a potential package. Like their focus would be on other parts of the infield. And I should also step back. The Red Sox wouldn't have a ton of interest in a Castillo for Casas deal either. The reason being, if they did that, then all of a sudden you're taking on Luis Castillo, really who's been an all-star caliber pitcher in multiple years of his career, but had a down year last year. And you do start to worry about whether or not the mileage is going to be taking him in that direction. So you're adding a guy who you probably profile as like a mid-rotation starter, albeit one who, like every Seattle starter, has drastic home road splits. Like the Seattle starters look, positively, by and large, like pretty mediocre when you get them out of T-Mobile Park. So there are some concerns there. The Red Sox would be adding starting pitching depth, but they would have to replace the production of Casas. So they're taking on the money that's owed to Castillo. They would probably have to be hitting the free agent market in like the Christian Walker class, right, to get a first baseman. Or maybe you're looking at taking on, Bregman or Arenado, but you're paying double, right? Like instead of having the one controllable guy who's going to cost you $800,000 this year in Casas and who you think has a chance to be a 40 home run hitter, you're making 2 separate moves where you're adding on a decent amount of money. How much better are you getting? Especially because Seattle's interest, if they move Castillo, they're probably going to need starting pitching back in addition to some position playing help. Where would that starting pitching help come from? Well, they'd be acquiring a guy like Cutter Crawford, who just on the surface, if you stuck Cutter Crawford in T-Mobile Park, he would probably be in the mix for the Cy Young. Like, his only issue last year was that he gave up home runs. Stick him in a park where the home runs go to die, and all of a sudden Cutter Crawford looks amazing. But you're probably looking at Cutter Crawford plus this, and this is just my speculation, so I don't want to, but you would probably, like, Seattle is probably going to be thinking, if we trade you Castillo, we want Cutter Crawford, who is going to be inexpensive and really, really good in our park, plus some position help. Let's say someone who would offer them depth, like, I don't know, like a David Hamilton or someone, right? Someone who has clear major league value right now. And so that's probably more of, and so the Red Sox probably value guys like that pretty highly. And so it's just a difficult deal to bring together. I'm not saying that rules it out, but you have some challenges in terms of figuring out how to make the pieces fit in a way that both teams would walk away satisfied. So that's why, like, the Casas for Castillo thing didn't really have legs.
What about Pittsburgh? Their pitching is younger. Their pitching is more controllable. Their pitching is not as expensive. And they feel, with Paul Skeens up now, and they think O'Neal Cruz is going to have a bounce back with a new position, like they feel they can compete for that division. Is there a trade to be made there? We heard Jones as a guy that obviously anybody would like. Would the Pirates move him, and how much would you have to give up?
I think people in the industry were shocked to learn that Jones, in fact, was available this offseason, because he has electric stuff. We talked about what the Crochet heat maps look like, where, like, there's the eye of Jupiter in the middle of the strike zone, and that's fine for allowing him to dominate. Jones is kind of in the same category from the right side, and he has 5 years of control remaining. So you're looking at him he's more valuable than Garrett Crochet as a trade chip, right? 5 years versus 2 years, and someone who already, who doesn't have quite the same health questions that Crochet did. So they're open to it, but it's going to take a Herschel Walker package in order to be able to do it, right? So I think that if the Red Sox were to talk with the Pirates about Jones, my guess is that Meyer would have to be right in the middle of it. And he's a guy who wasn't going to be available in any scenario that involved Garrett Crochet. I think that you would have to have Meyer would be the starting point, and then from there you are continuing to add to it. So you might be looking at maybe in that case, and again speculating, you're looking at like Meyer and like put in a Crawford or someone as a second piece, and then drawing from somewhere else in the top 10 prospects. I don't know. Maybe you're putting in like a Miguel Blaze, who has like all the upside in the world, but whose performance has been really even. Like, you're putting together a package of a major package in exchange for someone who would be spectacular. And if you were to pair Crochet and Jones for the next couple of years, or if you get the extension done for, well beyond that, the next 5 years or more, then you have a pretty interesting pathway, a pretty interesting foundation for being a really good team moving forward. But it's just going to be really interesting to see whether or not teams are able to find a package that they can offer to the Pirates that the Pirates would ultimately find satisfying. My guess is that the easier guy for the Pirates to move is going to be someone like Mitch Keller, who is more of a mid-rotation guy, he's going to cost a little bit more money. It's not insane money. There's still some surplus value there, and there's reliability there, but it's just hard for the Pirates, I think, to trade away the shoot the moon guys, who could really be the anchors of a world of whatever their view is of their ability to contend is built around their starting pitchers.
No doubt about that.
You talked a lot to the Pirates. Well, yeah. I'm interested in your sense of where the Pirates are at. And,
there's no doubt.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that they believe they are a couple of bats away from contending, for the division title. And again, wherever goes after that. But they think that division is there to compete in, and they know they need to add to the offense to do it. It was funny because I was poking a lot on a couple of names specifically, and you're right. Like Jones early on, like even like Sunday, Monday, everything was like, yeah, well, no. And then, maybe in part because what they saw Crochet got, right? Maybe they started to see what they could do in a deal with Jones. But there was definitely a little bit of a shift there. Nobody told me, yeah, we want to move him, but there wasn't the same hesitancy that there was at the beginning. Didn't get the feeling that they were, at least when I left Wednesday or when I last talked to them Wednesday, didn't get the feeling they were in close on anything with the Red Sox, although they did make a minor deal, obviously. But I think that makes a lot of sense if you could match up with one of those two guys. I mean, I really do, because yeah.
The one thing that I wanted, you mentioned how they view themselves as being a couple bats away. So Manaea makes sense as, as a guy with supreme upside. And I'm operating on the presumption that that Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell, if not completely unavailable, are unavailable enough that they're not worth talking about. But they would want immediate major league impact. So thinking about Crawford as the second piece makes less sense than talking about Casas or Wilyer Abreu.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I think the deal is.
Yeah.
Right. That's where I think if you, again, now this is you and me living in fantasy world, okay? But I absolutely think, if you wanted to get this done, you're talking Manaea and one of those two guys, the guy who can be a future franchise cornerstone along with a guy who helps you now. I think, and this is not Pittsburgh per se, but if you're making all these deals, you get Christian Campbell coming up. I always think, Vaughn Grissom, who you would be selling at an all-time low, is an interesting throw-in to get a deal done, right? I mean, he was the youngest guy on that roster at the end of last season. And it was, when Alex Cora said, just you got to try to give him a mulligan. It's a big mulligan. It's a whole year. It's an 18-hole mulligan. It's a round. It's not one hole. It's not one shot. But that said, the guy has hit everywhere he has been, and he's so young. Is that the kind of added piece? I feel the Red Sox could move him in a deal and be fine. I also wouldn't be surprised if he's your second baseman next year. But they have so many parts. It's still, when they made that trade and for Crochet and they moved 4 prospects, it didn't change the fact that while they were third in the American League in runs scored last year, it is still a lot of ill-fitting parts on that roster, right? They're getting crowded in the outfield. Yoshida's clogging up DH. Their second base has still been a mystery. And now the catching depth, now they did a little bit to address that, obviously, with the move. But it's not an easy roster to figure out right now. And I thought as this offseason went along, there'd be a couple of moves that not only would bring talent in, but would help clear that up a little bit. The Crochet deal did none of that because they were all minor leaguers.
Right, because the White Sox, that's part of the reason why Casas and Abreu are not involved in the White Sox deal, right?
Right.
The White Sox window for contention is way down the road, so those guys had way less appeal for them than high-end minor league prospects. Whereas with the Pirates, they're going to be looking for major league return if they move their pitching. Right, and the Red Sox didn't affect their inventory of guys who are currently either in the major leagues or have major league experience, like Vaughn Grissom. Grissom would be hilarious just because it seems like now the Pirates are acquiring every Red Sox second baseman.
Right.
Nick York, check. And Manuel Valdez, check. Who else is available? Let's go. I guess that they missed out on Mygroth. Shame for them to fail to monopolize that market. But yeah, I think that figuring out Vaughn Grissom's fit, there are huge potential ranges of outcomes for him. It's not there. There's clearly been no. There are very few players that are pegged down in the Red Sox organization right now, at least at the big league level. That's the strange thing, right? We spent the end of the season talking about how the Red Sox feel really good about where they're at in terms of the ability to take the step forward and compete in the American League East. At the same time, that's based on the volume of talent. It's not built around built around the one Bobby Witt guy. Right, that's the guy. I mean, even with Devers, the fact that there's kind of a degree of mutability with regards to his role and how he fits into the Red Sox future moving forward, it's kind of weird. It's a strange and interesting dynamic.
The current and future third baseman of the Boston Red Sox, Rafael Devers, because that became an interesting thing. The whole, you mentioned the top. The sudden and listen, after the Sean McAdam report came out that there was a difference of opinion in Alex Bregman, people, I'm not going to say names, but if there were sides in that story, people from both sides within the hour tracked me down to make it clear that there was not, which my reaction is, oh, so there is something there because you doth protest far too much. But it's the same way. Even before there was a lot of traction over the last week, and you've reported on it, there's been traction of the whole, Devers wants to play third, his agent wants him to play third, everybody wants him to play third. But even, Sunday, I was talking to Alex Cora, and he was like, listen, there is no plan to move Rafael Devers off third base, and I think that's clearly a message he's trying to get out to Rafael Devers. That's a conversation you're going to have very carefully. Probably going to have to be a flight to the Dominican Republic if you ever get to that. It's not something you're texting. You're not texting 3B thumbs up ? And it's a 4-character to it. I mean, you're diving into that, but it does, right? Because to me, Alex Bregman makes sense on this team, right? That would be a guy who makes sense. Teoscar Hernandez makes a lot of sense on this team, but again, we just talked about, so who's not playing? Who's not going to be in the outfield? If you bring in Teoscar Hernandez, you almost need to make another move to start to thin out the herd a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. They're in a position where you also wonder how that's going to play out with the rotation if they do keep adding. Like, does a Crawford become available? And I bring him up because he's really good, and I think kind of underappreciated for being really good. I think that
100%
there are a lot of
by Red Sox fans. 100%. Red Sox fans do not appreciate what they have in Carter Crawford. I think that's very true.
There are a lot of teams that would love to have him as a 4 who has the upside of a 3. And, I think that, he took the ball every time. So, but you bring him up because if you keep adding to the rotation, then are you really going to be carrying Crochet and a trade or free agent addition and Giolito and Bayo and Houck and Crawford, moving one of those guys into the bullpen? I'm not sure that that's where you're at.
No, because give them credit, and I think Craig Breslow has done a good job in very quickly addressing the depth. We said last year he was going to, and Fitz and Priester and Criswell are all behind the group you just said, and that is a much better depth chart than they had a year ago. You talked about the volume of talent on the position player side. Well, I think the back end depth is decent now for this rotation. And it's been a few years, and you could say that, right? Remember Alex Cora a couple of years ago, we need pitchers in Worcester who can come up and help us as starting pitchers. Well, they should have that next year. I don't think all those guys will be in the bullpen, right? So you should have really, decent AAA starting pitching available when you need to call up on it. But I still think, to go back to what we talked about at the beginning, you need to address the top. You did with Crochet. You need one more. So for so many reasons, I just think there's so much more to come in this offseason. And it's not as simple, they need to add this and this and this. Well, they need to add this and this and this, but they also need to subtract this and this and this to make room for that and that and that.
Yeah, and you're right. There's the whole round peg square hole, round peg square hole thing is definitely a factor in that, where you are thinking both in terms of the present of how does Yoshida fit into it when he is a good hitter, and we that was an unhealthy Yoshida who performed at a slightly better than league average level in 2024. What would he look like if he had 2 healthy shoulders? Interesting to think about. And yet you would be tethered to him in a DH role, and as a left-handed DH, no less, which obviously plays to an area of redundancy for the Red Sox when you're talking about left-handed bats. And the Devers question, look, even if the Red Sox resolve on, that he's a third baseman in 2025, I think it's fair to wonder, how many years is he going to be a third baseman for? Because, again, getting back to that whole question of how teams approach roster building and roster creation, there is that question of surplus value. Surplus value shifts, or offensive expectations shift based on position. So what Devers' offensive value is as a third baseman is greater than what it would be as a first baseman. And so then it lends itself to a lot of interesting and strange and interesting uncertainties about the Red Sox for the short term and the long term, and how to kind of make those things mesh, which is why it's exactly what you say it is. This is not just an additive offseason. It also requires some subtraction in some kind of like reshaping of different areas of the roster to put it together in a way that makes it fit as best as possible.
All right. we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to address the bullpen because I think they need to address the bullpen. Tanner Scott, to me, is the simple answer, isn't it? It's expensive, but it's a simple answer. Would he be enough to make this bullpen? Go ahead.
I think Scott or Jeff Hoffman both would make the bullpen look awfully good. I do actually wonder a little bit about whether or not, there would be greater comfort probably in adding a righty now that you do have Chapman and Justin Wilson. You're probably in a better spot in terms of not feeling a bias about handedness. Scott obviously is going to command, both of those guys are going to command kind of insane contracts relative to relievers. I mean, there's been speculation about 4 years for both. There's a part of me that wonders whether or not they're going to be next in line for a 5-year free agent relief contract, which that's not an area of great comfort. But then, you're seeing an 8-year commitment to Fried. So that certainly should have kind of ripples throughout the entire pitching market and not just the starting pitching market. And Hoffman's intriguing too, because as we talk about building out starter depth, he has a starter's repertoire. He was developed for a number of years as a starter. So there is kind of that intrigue related to having both of those paths as possibilities. But I think they clearly have to add top end relievers, right? Like that's not a secret. They need to be able to find, reliable strikeouts at the end of the game. And Chapman represents a start to that. But he's not like kind of a necessary, but not necessarily sufficient effort in that direction, particularly when you think about the fact that they're down Kenley Jansen, they're down Chris Martin. They already thought that their bullpen was inadequate last year. So you're looking at multiple arms that you still need to add.
If you were going to do power rankings as to who is the closer of the Red Sox, because I feel this could be 2013 again, where we see a few different guys take that role over the course of the season for various reasons. Is it Liam Hendriks at the start? Does he get the first opportunity to be the closer?
To me, that's the one that makes the most sense, because you also, with guys who are returning from Tommy John, and even someone who's pretty far, who's going to be, almost 2 years out from Tommy John, 20 plus months from Tommy John at the start of the season, the closer role does permit greater workload management than that kind of up and down guy, or the guy who you're warming up at a couple different intervals in the game. So just from the standpoint of workload management, it makes a lot of sense. And obviously he also has the track record back there, but we need to see the stuff too, right? Like you can't just say, oh, he's the guy, and then, oh, it's spring training and he's sitting at 92. I don't think that's going to happen, but they as long as Liam Hendriks looks kind of like the pre-Tommy John version of Liam Hendriks, then that would be my leader in the power rankings. Do you have an alternate suggestion?
Yeah, totally agree. No, yeah, I think you got to start with him. He's got the experience. He's got the mentality. He's an adrenaline guy. I mean, but when you see him at 2:00 in the afternoon, he's an adrenaline guy. But I think I think he's got. Yeah, it'll be fun. It will be fun to see what the mics pick up on the field. Because it was bad enough when he was doing live BP before family and friends. What he'll do if things go awry in the 9th inning. But yeah, I think he's interesting. Garrett Whitlock is interesting, right? Where he drops back into all of this when he comes off. But that's a conversation for another day. We're out of time. It was great having you back. I think the next time you'll be with us is for the Harvard Beanpot preview in late January. Is that correct? I think that's when we get you back.
I'll be grading everyone on a curve. Grade inflation will be rampant.
I'm not going to comment on that because I didn't get in. So that's for you. Listen, Alex, it was great. We missed you in Dallas. I'm glad we could do this. Happy holidays. You got to celebrate the birthdays. I hope you get to be in person for the holidays as well.
No Zoom holidays for either of us, Tom, I hope. But I just want to say, like, this whole year of doing this podcast / these Zoom sessions has been fantastic. Like the response has been wonderful. I hope that people have enjoyed watching or listening to this as much as I've enjoyed taking part in these conversations with you, because it's been a total blast.
Same here. Can't wait to do it again. Here's to a great 2025. And thanks to everybody who's made this possible. The reaction has been great, and it'll be bigger and better next year. I promise you that. We got a couple holiday best ofs coming up over the next few weeks, so but we'll look back at some of our great moments. Maybe they'll be short episodes. I'm not sure how many great moments there were. For Alex Spear, I'm Tom Karen. Thanks so much for checking out this edition of 310 to Left. We'll see you again next time.